Every Belgian schoolchild once learned that King Leopold II was a great philanthropist, a visionary monarch who brought civilization to darkest Africa. Through the Congo Free State, an international humanitarian project endorsed by the Berlin Conference of 1885. The textbooks described him as a benevolent reformer who abolished the Arab slave trade and brought Christianity, commerce, and civilization to the Congo Basin. The Belgian state portrayed its eventual annexation of the territory in 1908 as a reluctant assumption of duty, a rescue of a noble project from the king's exhausted hands. And the phrase crimes against humanity, we are told, emerged from the Nuremberg trials, a 20th century legal innovation. But in 1890, an African-American Baptist minister named George Washington Williams wrote an open letter to Leopold from the Congo itself, using the phrase crimes against humanity for the very first time in recorded history, condemning the brutal and inhuman treatment of the Congolese and reminding the king that the crimes committed were done in his name. Williams died on his journey home. Leopold disparaged the report and felt no compulsion to investigate. Question: why did the British Foreign Office, after receiving Roger Casement's 1903 consular report, documenting severed hands, mass floggings, and villages burned to the ground, initially suppress the full text and publish only sanitized excerpts? How did a single man maintain a personal colony the size of Western Europe for 23 years? If the Soviet Union invaded Western Europe and NATO forces were pushed back, someone needed to remain behind the lines to conduct sabotage, gather intelligence, and support resistance movements. While the crowned heads of Europe and the parliaments of the West looked away, to understand the architecture of this indifference, one must examine the stage upon which it was performed. At the Berlin Conference of 1885, the major European powers granted Leopold personal sovereignty over 900,000 square miles of the Congo Basin. Not to Belgium, but to his International Congo Society, an ostensibly humanitarian organization. The stated purpose was to suppress the Arab slave trade and bring free trade to the region. Leopold signed the Berlin Act, promising open commerce, humanitarian treatment, and the suppression of slavery. Within 5 years, he had abandoned every provision. He declared all uncultivated land vacant and available for his exclusive exploitation. He authorized forced labor for rubber and ivory collection through a system of quotas enforced by his private army, the Force Publique. The beneficiaries of this system were not the Congolese. They were Leopold's creditors, who financed his palaces and public works. They were the European investors, who received dividends from concession companies like ABIR. They were the industrial consumers of rubber in Europe and North America, whose bicycle tires and telegraph cables were lubricated by the latex extracted under the chicotte, the hippopotamus hide whip that became the symbol of the regime. What was erased from public memory was the systematic nature of the extraction. This was not colonial mismanagement. It was a deliberately designed machine for converting human life into profit. The investigative core of this story rests on documents and images that no amount of royal propaganda could fully suppress. In 1897, British consul Pickersgill filed a report on what he called Congo atrocities, documenting an attack on the village of Bandakea Wijiko, where 50 natives were killed, 28 taken prisoner, and all bodies had the right hand cut off. The severed hand was not an aberration, it was policy. The Force Publique required soldiers to provide one hand for every bullet fired to prevent ammunition from being wasted on hunting. Since rubber quotas were often unachievably high, hands became a substitute currency. Villages went to war against neighboring villages in lieu of their own harvest. A Catholic priest recorded the testimony of a man named Swambe, speaking of the hated state official Leon Fives. All blacks saw this man as the devil of the equator. From all the bodies killed in the field, you had to cut off the hands. He wanted to see the number of hands cut off by each soldier, who had to bring them in baskets. A village which refused to provide rubber would be completely swept clean. In 1903, British consul Roger Casement was dispatched to investigate. He traveled for 3.5 months through the interior, interviewing mutilated survivors, documenting villages where populations had plummeted from thousands to hundreds. He examined a boy of 11 or 12 whose right hand had been cut off by soldiers near Lake Mantumba. Of 6 mutilated individuals he interviewed, 5 were dead by the time of his visit. The Lukolela station's population fell from approximately 6,000 in 1891 to 352 by 1903. Bolobo declined from 40,000 to between 7 and 8,000. The Casement Report was presented to Parliament in February 1904 as Command Paper CD 1933. The Foreign Office had softened it, much to Casement's fury. But even the sanitized version was devastating. It inspired Edmund Dean Morel to resign his post and found the Congo Reform Association in 1904. Morel and the Harris's missionary photographers John and Alice conducted 600 public engagements across Britain and the United States, projecting lantern slides onto screens. One image, taken by Alice Harris in May 1904 at Baringa, shows a man named Nsala of Wala staring at the severed hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter. Mark Twain used these photographs in his political satire, King Leopold's Soliloquy, where the aging king complains that the incorruptible camera was the only witness that he could not bribe. The legacy of the Congo Free State did not dissolve with its annexation by Belgium in 1908. It created a template for how a single individual could privatize an entire territory, convert its population into a slave labor force, and maintain the fiction of humanitarianism through international law and diplomatic complicity. Leopold received 50 million francs in compensation from the Belgian state for surrendering his private fiefdom. He was never prosecuted, he was never even formally censured. The Belgian government assumed colonial administration but continued many of the same extractive practices in moderated form. The population continued to decline, reaching an estimated 10 million by 1924. The Congo Reform Association dissolved in 1913, its work considered complete. But the precedent it established of using documentary photography, consular reports, and transnational advocacy to expose colonial atrocities would not be replicated at scale for another half-century. Who covers it up today? Not a single conspirator, but a European educational system that still frames colonialism as a civilizing mission rather than a system of extraction. A global economy that continues to extract minerals from the same territory under different corporate names, and a historiographical tradition that treats Leopold's crimes as an exceptional aberration, rather than the logical endpoint of the colonial project he so nakedly embodied. The Casement Report sits in the British National Archives. Alice Harris's photographs are in Rhodes House, Oxford. They are not hidden, they are simply not taught. So here is the question I leave you with tonight. Should the former colonial powers establish permanent reparations tribunals with subpoena power to investigate and compensate for documented colonial atrocities like the Congo Free State? Or is this just a historical reckoning that would paralyze contemporary diplomacy and serve no one but the lawyers?